welcome everyone. This is to help you with your final exam revision. So I'm going to be uploading two clips on the Blackboard. This is the first one in which I'm going to be very generally and briefly talking about the format of the exam and some essay questions. And the second clip will be a very detailed revision for all the important parts of the lectures that we have covered in the course. So I am hopeful that this revision will be very helpful, inshallah. Let me first talk about the format of the exam. So your exam questions are divided into two parts. The first part of the exam is all MCQs. So there will be true and false questions. There will be questions where you have to choose or select the best option, and some ordering. One question will be to order things in terms of their sequence, and apart from that, you have one question to match. So all together, these kind of MCQs will be 32 questions, and each of these 32 questions will be 0.6 points. Apart from that matching question, which will be worth 1 point. So all the rest of the MCQs will be 0.6. Fine. Now these are your 32 questions, all MCQs. There will be 4 additional questions which are called essay questions. Now when I say essay, I don't want you to think of fully fledged written essays with introduction, main body of the text, conclusion, etc. No, essay questions in this context only refer to questions where a little bit of explanation is required. So don't worry about the length of your answer. If you can just write a few lines explaining your point, that would be enough. You don't need to go into details. I'm not going to grade you based on how long or how short your answer is. As long as you make your point and you fulfill the question requirement, you will be fine. You can be given full grade for these essay or writing based questions. Now the coming clip, which will be a detailed revision for all the lectures, for the important bits of the lectures, will cover all types of questions, MCQs and essays. But for essays, I am also going to very specifically pick some activity questions that we may or may not have discussed or revised in the class. So I'm going to take this opportunity in this clip to review some of those specific questions. Apart from them, the overall lectures that will be reviewed in the next clip will also help you with the essay questions. Alright, so I'm going to now specifically select from certain activities. I will tell you which activities and which questions are important. And of course, you will be reviewing the full lectures with the other clip, so you will have a better idea about any other possible essay questions. All right, so I gave you overall 8 activities, but out of these 8, I'm going to select the important ones. Now, activity 7, I gave you 2 questions. One, do all the different segments of the Muslim society agree on their understanding of ethics and morality? Explain why or why not. So the question was that do all the Muslims agree in terms of their understanding of ethics, in terms of their understanding of morality? So the answer is clearly no, they don't. There are many various viewpoints, and different sects among the Muslims have had their different interpretations of ethical and moral teachings in Islam. And I've already introduced you to some of these sects. There were Muslim philosophers, there were Muslim theologians, and there were fuqaha, and I gave you some of their subtypes. So the question like this is quite general, and it only refers to the fact that Muslims do not agree on one point, just like they have different opinions in their legal interpretation, in their theological matters. They also don't agree together in terms of their ethical and moral interpretation of Islam. The second question is related to the similarities between the views of Muslim philosophers and Sufis. So the similarity is that Muslim philosophers and Sufis both agree that the core and the essence of morality or ethics is to do with your spirit, with your soul. So the real place to implement ethics and morality is inside you, is your heart, your soul, your mindset, your viewpoint. The difference is that according to the Sufis, it is only limited to the inside world. It is only limited to the heart and mind and soul. And the actions have nothing to do with ethics and morality. There are no ethical or moral implications when it comes to your body, your physical structure, your form. So a'mal are not important. It's only what you have inside you is important. According to the Muslim philosophers, this point is not valid because God has created us as physical beings, as materialistic beings. So our heart, mind, and soul are, of course, more important, but our actions are also not less important because God could have just created us as souls. The fact that He created us as physical beings, it means that our physical actions, our contributions, our actions, they all count and they all are equally important. So this is a short answer to the question. You can of course elaborate more in your own style. You can find whatever explanation you want, but this is the principal idea. Okay, now activity 6. By the way, these numbers are as per the Blackboard listing. Don't worry about the numbers written inside because sometimes activities are not numbered correctly. It says activity 6, but inside it is activity 5. So don't worry about that. Just as per the Blackboard numbering, I'm giving you this revision. So I've just answered. Class activity 7. Now I'm going to now review class activity 6. So let me open this file for you. As per the numbering available here. So once again, let me confirm it to you that the inside numbering is not important. It's only how they are listed on the page. Now in this one, there are 3 issues, 3 major questions to do with law and morality. I'm going to shed light on each of them briefly. So the first one is the relationship between law and morality. Now, as you know, that from an Islamic viewpoint, the relationship between law and morality is extremely strong. The reason being is that in the secular context, laws can be generated from human experiences. They can be based on several other human considerations. They don't necessarily come from any revelation or any religion. However, in Islam, laws come from the divine, from the revelation, from the Quran, from Allah, from His Prophet. And morality also goes back to the same sources. Morality, akhlaq, all go back to the same origins. And this is why law and morality go hand in hand. They cannot be separated. Okay? So, as I gave you several examples, I mean, some examples you can come up with your own, on your own, but I'm just going to give one casual example is that if I am misbehaving or abusing someone, and let's say this abuse leads me to a punishment in the Islamic court. Now, in terms of the final judgment on my conduct, on my behavior, it can be said that my action was against the law because I disrespected a human being, I abused, I accused, I put false allegations, blah, blah, blah. And my behavior was also against Islamic morals. So I was doing something which wasn't accepted by law and morality at the same time. The same goes for all the different possible wrongdoings, misconducts, bad behaviors. Question number 2, how do you understand the categorization of the objectives of Islamic law in terms of essential, complementary, and embellishment? So if you go to the lecture on, if you remember, I gave you a lecture on the objectives of Islamic law, and this lecture is particularly talking about what are the essential maqasid of Sharia, essential objectives of Islamic law. You will see more in the next clip, which is kind of a revision. So you will get the answer that Islamic objectives or objectives of Islamic law have been categorized in 3 categories. The first one is the essential, daruriyat, and the second one is not min al-daruriyat, but it's called hajiyat, complementary. So daruriyat is the most essential aspect, hajiyat is the complementary aspect. So whereby your hajiyat will complement. I gave you the example. Daruriyat is, for instance, as-salah. That's the essential thing. But in order to make it possible or facilitate it, you have wudu, that is hajiyat. Okay? And then the embellishments, tahsiniyat. Embellishments or tahsiniyat refer to adding extra husn, extra beautification to your amal. For instance, prayer is essential, wudu is min al-hajiyat, and wearing nice clothes and praying with khushu' and khudu' and all of those aspects will be from tahsiniyat. So, and this is from lecture 5, by the way, as per the blackboard numbering. Lecture 5 will give you all these answers. Now, from the same activity, the third question is, explain any one of the 5 objectives of Islamic law by providing at least one example. So, when I generally use objectives of Islamic law, I am referring to ad-daruriyat, because that's what we have discussed in the class. We have not discussed hajiyat or tahsiniyat. So there are 5 objectives of Islamic law, min ad-daruriyat. In lecture 5, given all of them, what you have to do, you will simply have to pick one of them and explain and give example. For instance, protection of deen, protection of life, protection of dignity, protection of intellect, and protection of property. So you can give one example that any rule that is to safeguard one's property, one's milk, is part of the objective of Islamic law. So you might find many laws in Islam that are geared towards protecting one's milk and property. For instance, I am encouraged to safeguard my property, my milk. If somebody attacks my milk, my property, I can attack back, I can protect, defend. and so on and so forth. So all these Islamic rules and laws are connected with the idea of protection of property. Okay, now I'm going to open another activity. So uh, we have so far reviewed activity 7 as per the Blackboard and activity 6. Now let's look at activity 5. Now in activity 5 I only gave you one question, and that one question is regarding the debate regarding the relationship between nature versus nurture. If you remember, there is a full lecture on this issue, and in the revision clip, the lecture revision clip, you will find detailed answers um, on this discussion. Lecture 7, it is lecture 7. Sorry, lecture 4. I'm sorry, it is lecture 4. Nature versus nurture is lecture 4. So the idea is that you understand the Islamic viewpoint. So I give you quickly the Islamic viewpoint with an example, and then you can elaborate more. So I have mentioned here that there are people divided into several categories. Some believe that morals, ethics, all these things, they are already pre-programmed and they are in your nature. Some people believe that no, it's not true, and all of these values, they come from nurture. So the way we have been given tarbiyah. There is nothing good and bad in essence. In reality, it's only to do with how we have been trained. So these are the two extreme positions: nature versus nurture. Islamic viewpoint is that, according to the Islamic viewpoint, both are equally important. Nature refers to those values, those sensibilities, abilities that have been given to us by God. So there is already this hiss um, in our creation to understand what is right, what is wrong, good and bad, and so on. However, external factors, they conform to that. They help us realize those inner feelings better. So I am, as a human being, I am born with those qualities. I can distinguish between right and wrong. But my ability will be polished further, will be improved if I go through a good tarbiyah. So you see, good tarbiyah will help me reflect better what I already have inside me. This is the whole viewpoint of Islam. So Islam does not emphasize only on nature, and Islam does not emphasize only on nurture. It combines between the two. That's the answer to this question. And now, very quickly, we will. So we have reviewed so far activity 7, activity 6, and activity 5. Now I'm going to open activity 4. And in activity 4, only question 3 is important. So questions 1 and 2 are not important. Question 3 is important. What is question 3? What is the difference between cultural relativism and moral relativism? Explained by giving example. Cultural relativism is that when I believe that cultures are different and one culture can call something right while the other culture can call something wrong. This is cultural differences in terms of right and wrong. So for instance, eating with your hand is culturally right, fine in your context, in our context, in this country for instance, whereas in another country it may not be something very decent, it may not be acceptable. This is cultural relativism. So one culture can be different from the other culture in terms of their definition of right and wrong. Moral relativism is my personal judgments, my own views. So I can be, having any opinion about my personal judgments, but when it comes to culture, I can defend my culture. So I gave you an example in the discussion in the class. let's say I personally believe that maybe women don't have to wear abaya all the time. This is my personal belief, let's say. However, culturally, if somebody objects, if somebody coming from the West says that, oh, this abaya dress, this black thing, that the black robe that your women wear, it's nonsensical, it doesn't make sense, and it is bad, blah blah blah. So I can always defend, saying that maybe you are right in your context, but in our cultural context, this is considered decent, sober, modest clothing, and there is nothing wrong. In fact, it is more encouraged and more preferable. So you see, this is cultural relativism as opposed to moral relativism. Now, the last one, the last activity that we will be reviewing today is activity 3. In activity 3, I gave you 2 questions. So the first one is not important, the second one is important. Explain the problems with the definitions and scope of deontology in your own style by giving example. So deontology is a concept given by Kant, a philosopher, and according to deontology, good and bad can only be determined by first determining what is your duty. So once you determine that my duty is to do this and my duty is not to do that, your this is good and that is not good. So in other words, if I am a guard, my duty is to protect the property I am guarding. Now anything I do in order to protect my property will be considered good, and anything I do in terms of relaxing my protection, my guarding of the property will be considered bad. Now the problem with the definition is that if good and bad are only determined by duty, then a killer can say that I've been hired to kill. So killing is good for me. My boss has hired me to kill you. I don't care whether you are a good person or bad person, I just have to kill you, and that's a good thing because this is my duty. You see? So this is the problem, and this is why we found this deontology, the concept, problematic. You can find some other examples on your own. So this is it. In the first part, we have just discussed the format of the exam and activities 7, 6, 5, 4, and 3 as per the Blackboard numberings. Okay. Now please refer to the other clip that will be uploaded with this one, and that clip will go over all the lectures by highlighting the most important parts. All right, so now if you need any further clarifications, please write to me or stop by, and I'll be happy to entertain your questions or explain further. Any clarification required is welcome. All right, fi amanillah.